process. These have not sent anything in yet. If I click on Barnes and click Assess Selected Student, this is what I get. The assessment rubric that has been connected to this assignment is going to be with this tab. So click on Assessment Rubrics. Notice it opens a new window, and this has the rubric. If I click on this section, if you click on the top of this column, it will assign, if I hadn't already played with it, it would assign everything as a 4. And notice down at the bottom, it's going to say, I've still got something that I have selected. Okay, probably there. As you click in column 2 or column 3, either one, all the way down, then if you go to the bottom, you'll see what score, if you want a numerical score based on the weights of the columns and the rows, and you'll see that this is an 83. Now, if I click out of this, I have scored it. If I want the student to receive that grade off of that rubric, I can put an 83. If you don't want them to have a numeric grade and just say, you know, good job, and then you can put whatever comment you want to in there. One thing I didn't show you, I want to show you, make sure. Back on the rubric, do you see these little comment boxes? If a student doesn't score the top score, then it would be nice to give them feedback as to what they missed or why they didn't score the best on this. So you can give them feedback, and they'll see that when the rubric is submitted.
Probably it's best to establish the practice. We said this before, but to establish the practice of giving feedback for any score other than a 3. Any score other than a proficient. If they've done a basic or unacceptable, certainly we have to give them feedback. But even if they're exceptional out the top, it's nice to tell them why and what caused that. I would say proficient would be probably the only one that's not really demand a written feedback there. But certainly the bottom 2 do. If you're going to have a leg to stand on with the grade, and if you want to use this thing for improvement purposes.
I typically give feedback in the document or in the comment box also, but also do it in the rubric too.
Mm-hmm.
All that's good.
Mm-hmm. And notice some of Dr. Barnes' rows are correlated to rubrics, to standards. Some are not.
So Donna, if we click on the comment box, it populates that comment box for us to type in the text. Then when we X out, it still, we don't have to, that whole not saving.
I know, it's scary.
Okay.
It does save it. Now, it does not, if I come out or close it, all of that is saved, okay? But until you click submit assessment, the data doesn't dump. So you may score, part of it today and come back in, next week and score, or change your mind, or change.
We'll save the comments in that way too. It just won't send them to the students.
That's right. That's right.
Submit.
Right. That is correct.
And just to review, neither will it send it to the student if you clicked on that box while you were creating the assignment and told it to withhold.
Oh, okay.
That box on the right, withhold assessment
Unless we-
from the student. If you
But
click
it
there,
defaults to a click there, right?
What?
Does it default to a
No, it's blank. It
Okay.
defaults, it'll send it to you.
Oh,
You
okay.
have to tell it not to send it to you.
Are we still gonna need to require them to submit the whole portfolio, or can they do it as an assignment?
Or per assignment. I think
It's
of
been an issue, you always have to have the portfolio. We're supposed to put it in the portfolio.
correct.
Then submit the portfolio. They never,
They never do that. Some don't. Some
so it won't matter,
programs
it won't matter.
Depending on what you require. That addresses a different issue. Let me talk about that a minute. Dr. Hammond has suggested 2 or 3 times that we may want to use the entire portfolio in some kind of final assessment for students as evidence of their entire body of work, the program. We don't have many that do that now. But one of the reasons for requiring them to submit their portfolio and put their stuff in there first, and keep it up to date, is to keep it up to date. So that in the event that their portfolio is assessed completely finished near the end of their matriculation, they don't have to go back and spend 4 months trying to put everything back in there. It's a matter of keeping it up to
It was
date.
my understanding it was that it was easier just to pull those in case they would ask, well, we need samples of these portfolios. So that if we did pull a portfolio, it would have something in every one. I don't know if that's gonna be an issue.
I don't think so, because in that case, all that was in the portfolio were those learning outcomes.
Right.
That no longer is true. And I started to inject a few moments ago that this was a significant difference from the previous way of satisfying MCAT, which was to satisfy the 8 learning outcomes, which were, as you recall, assigned to a course and to a specific assignment per course. And so we ended up getting data that was scanty and only from one course, one assignment, one artifact. As Dr. Herring said, now with this system, it's going to pull all the data for standard 4.1 from every rubric that happens to have been used across the college, which gives a much more broad, rich indication of of multiple measures, number one, and of how they're doing on that particular standard at various places along the way. Does that make sense?
No, sir.
So let me ask you this, so when, in the past, when they submitted an assignment via the portfolio, is that the only way that it would post it within the portfolio? Is that why we did it? Or when we give them an assignment and they send it as an assignment, will it show up in the portfolio?
No.
But that's why we did it that way, so that those assignments would show up in the portfolio in the end, right?
They have to insert it in their portfolio.
And now in our portfolio, we have that reflective mastery of content piece too, that they're supposed to do every time, which we haven't started doing yet
In every course.
in every course. So they will have to go into every course on their portfolio, which is why it's built that way, submit, put their artifacts in there, and then do that reflection, because that's part of what we're gonna collect data on at the end, correct?
Correct.
Or at some point. So, and they can submit their portfolio as their document, and then you just open that portfolio, find your course, click on your course, and go from there.
That's right.
So, probably as a program, we need to decide everyone's gonna do it one way, so that it's not confusing from class to class, or professor to professor.
Yeah.
We can talk about that in our program
We
area.
will. Let me say that I think probably a great number of our faculty really don't know the feedback mechanism that's within the portfolio itself. And I'm going to talk about
Go
it,
ahead.
if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
And that is, if Dr. Stotts submits an assignment to the professor and puts it in the portfolio and attaches the portfolio then on the dashboard and submits it. And I then, the professor, open that up and open that assignment and assess it, like Donna said here, we're gonna assess that Jimmy Barnes assignment, it automatically opens the portfolio. And I can scroll down to your course, to that course, click on that, open it, find that assignment. And then, depending on how the instructor tells them to submit it, whether as an attached document or copied and pasted into the word processor, when I open it up and I have instructed you to copy and paste your work into that assignment section in that course, then LiveText has a mechanism that I can give you on the spot feedback. That little blue bubble, anywhere in that document. If I have a misspelled word, if I have a content issue, if I have a question or a comment that I want to make internally, if they only attach it as a Word document, then what do you have to do? You have to pull the document open, you have to open up, what do you call it with Word, where you edit?
Track changes.
What?
Track changes.
Yeah, your changes and do all that sort of thing, and reattach that document and that. But the other is really a neat process. Number two, when I send that back to the student, the course in which I have inserted my comments turns blue. And they know that there's an internal comment in that section. Did that make any sense?
For those of us that use Status on a regular basis for submitting documents, there's not a way to mesh that with this, is there? Because that's what we use the other platform, that's the value of using the other platform for grading, is because I use that, every assignment goes through that same assignment, I know most of us do that. So, there's no way to.
I have talked to Brennan about that, and you all have, they have, but to use that in LiveText, you have to also have an account, a Safe Assign account, so that they will.
Or maybe turn it in or something like that. I'm
Or
sorry I'm
something.
bringing that up, but I just,
Mhm.
everybody's probably thinking.
Right.
So, because then you get into this situation where you're gonna put this, insert it over here in Blackboard to ensure that. And then they're gonna insert it over here, so where are you gonna grade,
Yeah.
Because traditionally, I think in our program, we use this as a data collection platform. And we need to do better about using it to provide feedback for our students, that's for sure. And it's great for that. But I think there's still some limitations there based on what we need to do. Do you all agree they're in my area?
That makes sense. Perfect sense.
Yeah.
I've got a question. Donna mentioned that with the oral, that there would be nothing.
Mhm.
And I've got a standard that's similar to that, so I've had to, it's how they use social media. That's one of my standards. And so, I can track that by looking at our Facebook accounts and things like that they use. So we can actually have an assignment where they don't have an artifact or some type of and we can get away with that with Kate.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And let me give you another example of that. And I thought of this just a minute ago. The dispositions rubric could be inserted in every course. A dispositions assignment, they wouldn't turn in anything for that,
Right.
but you would assess it, right, at the end of every course. So that'd be another example of that type thing. And it might or might not be viewable to students. That'd be up to you.
And you're talking about that mid-review that we did, that we're going to put that in the comments.
You could, yeah.
Yeah. We're working on that.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you want to share a rubric within your department, say Linda creates it but wants to share it with the other faculty to keep them from having to create it. All she has to do is open the document and share it with the professors. if you're the one that it was shared with, it's now in your inbox and not on your desktop, okay? One other thing, it depends on how, we used to run data on rubrics, like Learning Outcome 1. We would run a report on that rubric. So it was important, and I'm sure you got many memos from the dean's office saying, don't change this rubric, don't rename it. This is the rubric, because we were running a report on a rubric. So if Linda shares that rubric and you edit and rename it, then if we run a report on the rubric, you're going to have two separate reports. The wonderful thing about the way we can run reports now is we run it on standards. So it really doesn't matter if it's the same exact rubric. If it's correlated somewhere in a rubric, then that standards report is going to pull it. So that makes things a lot better from the reporting end.
And you may have a rubric like a research class. We all teach research in our departments now and programs, basically. And we're really asking our students to do essentially the same things in those courses. However, two instructors may have slightly different things that they're assessing in slightly different ways. So that rubric might be tweaked a little bit by each person that uses it, but it's still fairly common and could be looked at as a common rubric. But it would also, you would draw from the same standards that would be embedded in those rubrics. There would be common standards across all of them.
Keep in mind, if you open it, tweak it, and rename it, it now becomes yours and shows up under your documents and not in the inbox. So inbox is strictly shared. Once you make it yours by renaming it or changing or whatever, then it becomes your document and it's in your documents list. Any other questions?
I do have a question.
Okay.
When you go to pull up the standards, are they in order by creation? Because like the NAEYC, there's like 6 or 7, 8. And I can see somebody has tagged years, there's 2009, 2010, but then there's some just say NAEYC, NAEYC Association,
Put in my line too.
Huh.
NAEYC. So are they in order that they were created?
Not necessarily.
And I'm not sure which ones I need to tag in.
I think we need to look at that by the program so that we make sure everyone is
Have the right one.
selected the same exact.
You've ran into that, Linda, haven't you, with leadership standards? Just sort of have to open the list and see if it's the,
Those were supplied to Live Text by, in what you just said. They are supplied to them. And there are different versions, yes. And I guess the answer to the question is you're the expert in that field, in that, for your SPA set. So you just have to look and identify which ones are the contemporary ones.
I'll try to do that in the next week or so, if I can get a moment to identify which of the three, because we have 3 spas in our program.
Most all the SPAs have multiple sets in there.
keep in mind LiveText has been in existence for many, many, many years. So universities have been running reports for many, many, many years, and they're not going to delete a set because it might be something that's on a report 10 years ago. And I know when I sent in that 2014 list, and I mean within 2 weeks, I think it was, Dr. Hammett said, oh, we made some adjustments. Can you replace it? So I call LiveText and say, I want, how can I replace it? And they said, I'm sorry. We can't rename it. We can't delete it. All you're going to do is add a new set, and you're going to have to come up with another name because once it's in place, they're not going to take it out because somebody might be using it or have used it. Good question. Anything else? Dr. Turner, can you think of anything that we've missed?
Don't think so.
This was very helpful to me, by the way.
Well, thank you. Good.
I'll just make a comment. You can, some of you have constructed rubrics in live text before, some of you have not. And you recognize that this is a tedious job. As the dean says, there's a lot of grunt work up front. But once it's carefully constructed, then it really can be used again, and shared again. We've been going about an hour and a little over. Let's take about just a 5-minute break, come back, and then I'm going to get into evaluating the quality of rubrics and what'll fly and what won't. Okay?
Okay, thank you. If you need ever to email me, I'm still in the JSU email, and just shoot me an email.
Created rubrics before, but I don't have my, that was different, so this was very helpful.
Good.
The case across, with the exception of our part.
Yeah. Well, we just haven't
You got, how many new people do you see in here? I know Butch and Kim Warfield in our department. All right. Dr. Herring's email is dherring, DHERRING @jsu.edu. If you have questions or roadblocks going forward, call her, email her, and she'll be glad to help, and certainly I will. Dr. Bavanese, I'm gonna check on the safe assign thing. I know Bremen Hensel talked about that with us, and I don't remember what he said, but we're gonna get an answer to that. I want to take a few minutes for us to talk about rubric quality. Now, and I'll make some introductory comments. One is that rubrics may be extremely simple, i.e. one-liners, or they may be extremely complex. I have a CAPE-approved rubric down in my office that I started to duplicate, but it would have taken a major part of a forest to do that. It had 6 or 8 pages and so forth, and that's not uncommon. We've been wrestling with this issue in the college about the performance assessment, the OCEOI, and what kind of form it's going to take, because it's just a long, cumbersome document, right? At the best, and we're still chewing on that. But rubrics take all kinds of forms. But CAPE is concerned extremely about the quality of our rubrics. And by the way, let me quickly say, CAPE is concerned about the quality of the rubrics that we use college-wide. Not necessarily so much concerned as the ones you may use individually for individual assignments. So for us as a college right now, the only rubric that we have that will be college-wide is the disposition rubric.
Did that get finished up from last week?
Pretty much. But that will be the only one that we have right now. But I'm still chewing on, really wrestling with a simplification. Don't throw things at me. At a simplification of that CEOI that would be uniform. Minimal expectations of first-year teachers regardless of the field they're in. Okay? And to see if we can have another common rubric. And then I wasn't just arbitrary in thinking about research when I mentioned that a moment ago, because, for example, all of our programs at the master's level and some at the undergraduate do some kind of research class, right? And it may be ESE 500 or EFD 500 or whatever it is in the alt fifth and the master's level. And we really should have a uniform rubric for that course, right? If we're teaching research. So that would be another one that would be used across the board. Still another might be a diversity rubric, right? Particularly with CAPE and the State Department's new standards about diversity inclusion in all of our courses at all levels. Is that making any sense? Those are some of the areas that I think we might be able to generate and utilize logically and effectively a college-wide rubric for those areas. But beyond that, I'm at a loss. I don't know how many more that would be. So we have to submit our rubrics that are used college-wide to CAPE for their evaluation. And we literally could fail accreditation on the basis of the quality of those rubrics. We have the opportunity to submit to them those rubrics for evaluation 3 years ahead of our official. And that was mandated to begin with by CAPE, but now has become voluntary. Well, we're going to volunteer, and we're going to send them to CAPE 3 years ahead of our next visit, which means probably year after next. We will submit whatever we have by year after next using college-wide. We'll submit and say, tell us if it's good or not. The quality issue is in Standard 5. Standard 5 for CAPE is the Quality Assurance Standard. It's the fifth of 5 standards for NCAPE CAPE. It's the Quality Assurance Standard. Section 2 says the provider's quality assurance system relies on relevant, verifiable representative, cumulative, and actionable measures. Those are 5 characteristics that our rubrics must have, okay? Measures. And produces empirical evidence that interpretations of the data are valid and consistent. Consistent meaning reliable, right? Valid and reliable. Now, Dr. Basil Conway, who is a new professor math in secondary education, has joined our steering committee as our statistical expert. Okay? And he is the one who is going to be leading us in validating and establishing inter-rater reliability and so forth of the rubrics that we use college-wide. Okay? The second thing, ladies and gentlemen, that we have to do, we have to show that the dispositions rubric, and I'm giving you specific language here, we have to show that the dispositions rubric that we use for our students, our candidates, has predictive validity. And what that means is we have to correlate how well they scored, on their dispositions assessments all through the program with their success in the field 3 years out. With such things, and not just 3 years out, but did they pass the praxis? How well did they do on the EdTPA? Were they hired, then rehired, and then did they gain tenure? Are you with me? So those are 4 or 5 benchmark measures out there beyond, and we are going to take that dispositions rubric and see if we would have been able to predict their success or lack thereof. Makes sense, doesn't it? Conceptually, do you think you could? You think you could take a dispositions assessment and predict how well they're going to do in the field?
It's done consistently and accurately.
In general, yes, but Linda said what? Can it be done consistently and accurately? That's the other part of that, not just subjectively. But I think it's possible. I think we'll be pleasantly surprised at how well it does.
Your cape's got to go back to the drawing.
Well, that's true.
What they're hanging everything.
They are hanging that on it, yeah. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Sure does. And our experience, I mean, I'm going in a new position here and with little data, but anecdotally from what I've heard from you guys is that I've often heard statements like this: well, we knew this from the beginning. Well, you probably did. We just didn't have any document to substantiate it, right? We didn't have anything with teeth in it that would substantiate what we felt in our guts from the beginning or we observed in early classrooms, right? And so now we're trying to develop that instrument and utilize it in a professional manner. So I think that's one of the things there. All right. I've already mentioned this. CAPE will review 3 years out our instruments, and those are only the ones that are used by the EPP. EPP is the whole college-wide. Now, a general list. And by the way, Melinda, Janet, Dr. Stobbs, Dr. Bavanese have seen most of these. I borrowed much of this from Lance Tomei, Dr. Tomei, who is a consultant with AACTE, with CAPE and NCATE and LiveText all, and he is sort of, would I be saying, the rubric guru out there whose expertise in evaluating rubrics is pretty well widely recognized. And he says there are commonly encountered weaknesses. One is using overly broad